Another day, another banger. Today we'll be diving into the complete movie franchise of the Alien movies. This will be in chronological order, starting from Prometheus, then going to Alien Covenant. After that, we'll get into Alien, Aliens 2, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection. Don't worry, I've constructed this recap in a way where you can watch from the release date order, which is in the description. And as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the recap. Prometheus starts off showing us a vast barren landscape. With miles of empty wasteland, the desolate location is brought to life by a massive spaceship over a waterfall. With a hooded alien approaching the ship, we are introduced to the ghost engineer. Placing a weird artifact on the ground and removing his cloak, he opens it up and drinks from it. With the ship leaving, the engineer begins changing. Weird marks start appearing all over his body, and even his DNA begins changing and breaking. Screaming in agony, he falls into the waterfall and dies underneath the water with his body dissolving. On Earth, meanwhile, archaeologists dig at the Isle of Skye in Scotland 2089. The two lead archaeologists, Elizabeth and Charlie, discover paintings in a cave over 35,000 years old. With such a huge finding, one painting shocks them as they match a series of paintings from places all around the world that could not have shared the information. In space, meanwhile, at the scientific exploratory vessel named Prometheus with a crew of 17 in the year 2093, the ship travels through space when we discover the humans about the ship are asleep in cryopods. With the android David being the only one awake on the ship, he uses his spare time to understand humans and their culture. Even spying on Elizabeth, he gets to see her father explain that different cultures have different beliefs when it comes to death. After 2 years of traveling, the ship finally reaches its destination. David, the android, wakes up the entire crew, which is made up of both mercenaries and scientists. As everyone recovers from the effects of cryosleep, they take time to eat and regain their strength. Captain Yannick, in a light-hearted gesture, puts up a small tree, noting that they missed the holidays. However, Meredith, the stern overseer responsible for ensuring everyone stays on task, finds this action foolish. Soon after, the mission briefing begins. Meredith plays a holographic message from Peter, the CEO of Weyland Corporation, the company funding their expedition. Peter explains that by the time they see this message, he will already be dead. He also mentions that David is the closest thing he ever had to a son. Peter's lifelong quest has been to discover where we come from and what happens after we die, which is why he supported this mission when Elizabeth and Charlie approached him with their theory. The doctors then take over the briefing. They explain that the ancient paintings they discovered all over the world depict a star map leading to a planet with its own sun, capable of sustaining life. That's where they are now. Elizabeth believes this map was left by an alien race she calls the Engineers. As her theory suggests, they were the ones who created humankind. Despite her conviction, the rest of the crew remains skeptical. As the ship approaches the planet, Meredith calls the doctors to her private quarters. Her quarters are equipped with her own medical pod and a self-contained life support system. Meredith expresses her skepticism about the cave scribbles, doubting they hold any real significance. She makes it clear that she's only on this mission for Peter, and it's her responsibility to ensure that the money isn't wasted. She then warns the doctors that if they do find life, they are forbidden from making contact. This directive leaves the doctors questioning the purpose of their mission. Meanwhile, David has spent the last 2 years deconstructing dozens of ancient languages and is confident he can communicate with the Engineers. However, when he sends a message to the planet, there's no response. Despite this, the crew decides it's time to land. As they descend through the atmosphere, the ship detects no radio signals or heat sources, suggesting there is no civilization below. However, Charlie notices straight lines on the ground, something that couldn't have occurred naturally, so they decide to land at that spot. The crew prepares for their expedition. Even though David doesn't need a suit, he wears one to blend in with the humans. They use a series of vehicles to reach a dome-like structure that geologist Fifield is unsure about. He can't tell if it's natural or not, but he is certain it's hollow. Inside, Fifield releases 2 special probes to map the area, allowing the team to navigate through a network of corridors. As they venture deeper, they discover a source of water heated by sunlight with acceptable CO2 levels. While the outside atmosphere is toxic, the air inside appears to be breathable. Charlie speculates that the aliens had been terraforming, and he takes the risk of removing his helmet, confirming that it's safe. Following his lead, the rest of the crew removes their helmets to continue exploring. During their exploration, David discovers a wall covered in strange symbols and a mysterious goo. Using his knowledge of ancient languages, he activates the symbols, which triggers a sudden hologram of figures running through the corridors. The crew follows these figures and eventually finds the body of an alien lying next to a door that seems to have killed it. Sensing the growing danger, Fifield, who feels his role as a geologist is no longer necessary, decides to return to the ship along with biologist Milburn. While the doctors examine the alien body, David manages to open the door and finds the alien's head on the other side, remarkably well preserved. The rest of the crew discovers more bodies, indicating the species might be extinct. This room also contains worms, suggesting that life is possible here. Additionally, they find a monolithic statue of a humanoid head, murals on the ceiling, and several stone cylinders. David notices that the cylinders are sweating, and one begins to release a black organic substance. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, focused on the murals that have started to change, realizes the atmosphere in the room might be affected and insists they leave. She and Charlie quickly bag the alien head to take it with them, while David secretly takes one of the cylinders, suspecting that the cave may actually be a tomb. At that moment, Yannick discovers a dangerous storm approaching and urgently contacts the doctors to warn them. Meredith gives them just 15 minutes to return before she seals the ramp. The crew rushes out of the cave and drives back to the ship as quickly as possible, making it just in time. However, during the chaos, the alien head falls from the vehicle and Elizabeth runs to it, but the storm catches her and makes her go flying. Charlie attempts to rescue her by driving into the fierce wind, but he gets stuck as well. In the end, David manages to pull them both to safety using a set of wires. Afterward, the crew starts the process of decontaminating their bodies in the hangar, only to realize that Milburn and Fifield haven't returned. It turns out the two scientists are lost inside the cave. Yannick manages to contact them, but due to the storm, they must wait until morning for rescue. Meanwhile, the team sterilizes the alien head and quickly discovers it's not an exoskeleton, it's actually a helmet. When they remove it, they find a humanoid alien head inside. The head has cells on its forehead that appear to be changing, so the team decides to run a stem line into its brain to make it think it's alive. The experiment works at first as the face starts to move, but soon the overstimulation causes the head to explode. Elizabeth takes a closer look at a sample from the head and is thrilled to find that its DNA matches human DNA, confirming her theory that these beings created the human race. Meanwhile, David goes to update a mysterious person in a cryosleep pod that no one else is aware of except Meredith. When Meredith confronts David, demanding to know what the person said, David only replies that they were told to try harder. David then inspects the cylinder he secretly brought back, finding a collection of capsules containing a black liquid. This discovery gives him an idea, and he decides to visit Charlie to share a drink as they ponder how far they would go to find the answers they seek. Later, Charlie joins Elizabeth in her room where she shares the exciting news about the DNA. In the cave, Milburn and Fifield stumble upon a disturbing pile of alien bodies when they suddenly receive a call from Yannick. He warns them that the scanner has detected signs of a life form nearby. The scientists start to worry, but then the ping on the scanner abruptly disappears, which Yannick attributes to a glitch. As they continue exploring, Milburn and Fifield find the room with the monolith and notice black liquid seeping from the cylinders. To their surprise, they spot a reptile-like alien swimming in the liquid. When Milburn gets closer, the creature latches onto his arm and tries to break it. In an attempt to help, Fifield cuts the creature off, but this only causes the alien's corrosive fluid to spray onto his helmet, which eats through the plastic and reaches his face. While Fifield writhes in pain, the creature slips inside Milburn's suit and kills him. The next morning, Charlie wakes up feeling unwell and notices something strange in his eyes. Yannick informs the crew that the storm has passed, but he hasn't been able to contact the scientists, so they decide to go search for them. Unable to find the glitch in the scan, David assures Yannick that he will locate the probe and fix it. However, as the group enters the cave, David intentionally lags behind and takes a different path, sending a recording of his findings to Meredith. He discovers another room filled with thousands of cylinders and alien armor, and then follows a corridor to a chamber containing numerous cryosleep capsules. David cuts off communication with Meredith before activating a machine in the center of the room, which displays holograms of the engineers examining a star map that includes Earth. When the holograms disappear, David notices that one of the cryosleep capsules is glowing, indicating that it still contains a living engineer. Meanwhile, as the search continues, Charlie starts stumbling, and Elizabeth realizes he's becoming increasingly ill, though he insists on pressing forward. When they finally discover Milburn's body, they approach it, causing the small reptile alien to leap out and slither away. However, Fifield is nowhere to be found. At that moment, Charlie's condition worsens significantly, prompting Elizabeth to order everyone to return to the ship to quarantine him. By the time they reach the ship, Charlie's skin is starting to turn black. Meredith meets them at the hangar armed with a flamethrower, refusing to let Charlie aboard. Yannick and Elizabeth argue with her, but Charlie, realizing his dire situation, walks towards Meredith, forcing her to incinerate him while Elizabeth watches in despair. Moments later, the crew is placed in quarantine and David conducts tests on Elizabeth to ensure Charlie didn't infect her. To their shock, the scan reveals that Elizabeth is 3 months pregnant, which seems impossible since she was in cryosleep 3 months ago. Even more disturbing, the fetus has a strange, unnatural shape. Horrified, Elizabeth demands to have it removed, but David explains that they don't have the necessary equipment to perform surgery. Suddenly, Elizabeth's abdomen begins to hurt, and David gives her medicine to make her sleep. A short time later, a few crew members attempt to move her to a cryosleep capsule. However, Elizabeth is determined not to carry this creature and fights them off before fleeing to Meredith's medical pod. She requests a cesarean, but the pod is only calibrated for male patients and she instead asks for the extraction of a foreign body instead. The machine accepts this request and administers anesthetics that aren't that strong. and she still experiences unbearable pain as a mechanical claw removes the strange fetus from her body. As soon as the fetus is out, it bursts open, revealing a creepy alien that immediately begins flailing its tentacles. Elizabeth endures the attack while the machine quickly closes her wound. As soon as the stitches are complete, she escapes the pod and locks the alien inside, leaving it to be subdued by the anesthetics. Meanwhile, Yannick notices something unusual standing in front of the ship, and one of the crew members is sent to investigate. To their horror, it's a mutated Fifield who immediately begins attacking everyone in the hangar. A fierce battle ensues, and when bullets prove ineffective against Fifield, the crew resorts to using a flamethrower to finally take him down. As Elizabeth wanders through the ship, she eventually stumbles into the infirmary, where she's shocked to find Peter still alive. He was the one in the extra cryosleep pod that David had been communicating with, and it turns out the medical pod was meant for him. Peter reveals that he wants to meet his maker, the engineer, and demand answers. So David is planning to take him to the living engineer they discovered in the cave. Elizabeth tries to warn them that this planet is far more dangerous than they originally thought, but her concerns are dismissed. Determined not to give up, Elizabeth pushes through her pain, suits up, and prepares to return to the cave. Before she leaves, Yannick approaches her and shares his belief that this isn't the engineer's home planet. He suspects the cave is actually a military installation, where the engineers were developing the black liquid as a weapon of mass destruction, which ultimately leaked and killed them. Yannick expresses his desire to return to Earth, but Elizabeth persuades him to stay until she can communicate with the last remaining engineer. As Peter prepares to leave, Meredith confronts him, trying to stop him from risking his life in what she calls some hole. She addresses him as father, but despite her pleas, Peter ignores her warnings and continues with his plan. Taking off, the crew soon arrives at the cave, and David instructs everyone to remove their helmets, revealing that the disease isn't airborne, hinting that he was the one who put the black liquid in Charlie's drink. As they proceed to a new room filled with thousands of cylinders, David refers to it as a cargo hold. This new perspective makes Yannick and Meredith realize that they aren't in a cave at all, they're inside a starship. David activates the ship's machinery, explaining that the engineers were preparing to leave for Earth when they lost control of the black liquid, which ultimately killed them. The last remaining engineer is awakened, and while Elizabeth tries to ask questions, Peter silences her by having one of his mercenaries strike her. Peter then begins to ask his own philosophical questions, which David translates into Proto-Indo-European. However, instead of answering, the engineer violently reacts by ripping off David's head and using it to kill Peter. He then pushes Elizabeth aside and begins killing the mercenaries who futilely try to stop him with bullets. Back on the ship, Meredith witnesses Peter's death through David's eyes and orders Yannick to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, the engineer activates his ship, intending to fly to Earth. Elizabeth manages to escape, but she realizes that if the engineer succeeds, the black liquid will reach Earth and wipe out humanity. Desperate, she contacts Yannick and pleads with him to stop the engineer at any cost. Despite Meredith's insistence that they should leave the planet without interfering, Yannick decides to act. He orders his pilots to prepare the ship's ion propulsion, effectively turning Prometheus into a massive projectile. Meredith flees the ship, and though Yannick gives his pilots permission to do the same, they choose to stay and sacrifice themselves alongside their captain. In a matter of seconds, Prometheus crashes into the engineer's ship, successfully preventing it from leaving the planet. However, the collision causes both ships to plummet to the ground. Elizabeth and Meredith race to avoid being crushed, but Meredith isn't fast enough and dies in the process. Elizabeth, on the other hand, finds shelter next to a rock and survives. Afterward, she returns to Prometheus to gather supplies and hears strange noises coming from deeper within the ship. Armed with an axe, she investigates and discovers that her alien offspring has escaped from the medical pod and has grown significantly in size. At that moment, David contacts Elizabeth and urges her to run. The engineer appears and pushes her against the wall, causing her to release her alien offspring, which immediately attacks the engineer. As Elizabeth escapes, the creature subdues the engineer by thrusting an ovipositor down his throat. Outside the ship, Elizabeth experiences a breakdown, but David contacts her again, explaining that there are more engineer ships hidden underground and he can pilot one of them. Elizabeth rescues David's head and body but makes a request. Instead of returning to Earth, she wants to go to the engineer's home planet. David agrees, even though he doesn't fully understand her desperate need for answers. Before they leave the planet on the alien ship, Elizabeth returns to Prometheus one last time to send a message to Earth, explaining what happened. Moments later, a black alien emerges from the dead engineer's body, and it is both hideous and evil in every aspect. Alien Covenant begins many years before humanity ventures into space, with David, an android, being activated and tested by his creator. As David performs tasks requiring both intellect and physical coordination, he notes that while he was created by a human, humans themselves don't know who created them. He also reflects that by the time he finds the answer, his creator will likely be dead. Fast forward 11 years after the Prometheus expedition, and it's now 2104. The colony ship Covenant is en route to the planet Origai 6, carrying over 2,000 colonists in cryosleep and more than 1,000 human embryos. While the humans sleep, the ship is managed by an AI called Mother and an android named Walter, a more advanced version of David. Suddenly, a neutrino blast from a nearby stellar ignition strikes the ship, causing severe damage and multiple fires while shutting down power. As the entire ship shakes, Walter struggles to contain the flames, and 15 crew members are awakened to handle the emergency. Unfortunately, the captain's pod gets stuck, and despite their efforts, the crew is unable to save him, forcing his wife Daniels to watch as he is incinerated. The surviving crew manages to extinguish the fire, but the damage is severe. 47 colonists and 16 embryos are lost. As the group recovers the captain's body, Daniels takes a moment to grieve while going through his belongings. Meanwhile, First Officer Orem assumes command and urges the crew to focus on repairing the ship to prevent further losses. Some crew members express the need for time to process the tragedy, but Orem insists that their priority must be to fix the ship. While working together, Daniels shares with Walter a dream her husband had about building a cabin on the new planet. Walter encourages her to pursue that dream in his memory. Later, the crew honors their fallen captain with a toast and ceremonially shoots his body into space. Later, pilot Tennessee goes on a spacewalk to conduct exterior repairs, carefully reconnecting the sails to restore the ship's power. Suddenly, he receives a distorted and fragmented transmission, though the ship's comms remain unaffected. Puzzled, Tennessee brings his helmet in for analysis, and the crew hears a strange sound which they identify as John Denver's country roads. When they trace the transmission source, they discover it came from a nearby planet that seems perfect for human habitation, even better than the predictions for Origai 6. Seeing this as a promising alternative that wouldn't require another 7 years of travel, and with no one eager to return to cryosleep after the recent deaths, Orem decides they should land there. Daniels, however, pulls Orem aside to voice her concerns about exploring an unknown planet that sent such a strange transmission. Despite her worries, Orem remains firm in his decision to proceed with the landing. A few days later, the crew reaches the planet. Tennessee, Ricks, and Upworth remain aboard the Covenant in orbit, while the rest of the crew descends to the surface in a shuttle. As they pass through the stormy atmosphere, the shuttle shakes violently, causing them to temporarily lose contact with the Covenant. Fortunately, they make it through safely and are greeted by the vast openness and beauty of the planet. The crew finds a suitable spot to land, and Maggie stays behind in the shuttle to re-establish contact with the Covenant while the others set out to explore the land. The planet is full of rich vegetation and has breathable air, but oddly there are no signs of animal life. They're also surprised to find wheat growing, which, though old, was clearly cultivated by someone. As they explore further, Corrine decides to stop and take some samples, with Ledward staying behind to protect her. While Corrine works, Ledward takes a break and unknowingly steps on some small pods, allowing tiny bacteria to come out. Weirdly enough, it enters his ear and soaks itself into the body. Meanwhile, the team ventures further and discovers a cluster of crushed trees, leading them to wonder what could have caused such massive destruction. As they continue, they come across a large crashed engineer ship and decide to enter it in search of answers. Inside, it's dark and eerie. Hallett stumbles upon more of those small pods and accidentally inhales the bacteria as well. As they explore deeper into the ship, they find creepy statues representing an alien race along with military tags and a photo belonging to Dr. Shaw from the missing Prometheus expedition. When someone inadvertently touches a sphere, it activates the ship's main system, revealing that this is the source of the transmission they heard earlier. Suddenly, Ledward starts feeling unwell, initially dismissing it as a headache, but his condition rapidly deteriorates. Corrine alerts the others that they're heading back to the shuttle, and the rest of the team decides to follow suit. At that moment, Hallett also begins to feel sick. Corrine manages to drag Ledward back to the shuttle, but as they arrive, he vomits blood on her. Maggie assists in getting him to the med bay, but when they remove his clothes, a wound on his back suddenly bursts open, spraying blood on Maggie's face. Terrified that the illness might be contagious, Maggie locks the door and leaves just as Ledward begins having a seizure. Suddenly, 2 sharp spikes burst from his back, and his body splits open, revealing a pale creature known as a neomorph. With Maggie refusing to open the door, the neomorph attacks Corrine, killing her despite her desperate attempts to defend herself. Maggie, in a panic, grabs a weapon and tries to kill the creature but fails and is forced to flee. The neomorph smashes through a window and chases her, moving too quickly for Maggie to land a shot. In the chaos, a stray bullet hits flammable tanks, causing an explosion that kills Maggie and destroys the shuttle, though the neomorph manages to escape. At the same time, Hallett's condition worsens and his mouth suddenly bursts open, giving birth to a second neomorph, which quickly flees into the wild. Meanwhile, Tennessee grows increasingly worried about the lack of communication with the team and wants to check on them, but Upworth advises waiting until it's confirmed safe. Moments later, the neomorphs, now much larger, reappear and viciously attack the team, killing several members as they struggle to defend themselves. In the chaos, Walter steps in to save Daniels, losing a hand in the process. After a tense battle filled with shots in the dark and wounded soldiers, the team manages to kill one of the neomorphs. Suddenly, a hooded figure appears and shoots a flare, causing the second neomorph to flee. The figure urges the team to follow him, and they are led through a gate into the ruins of an old city filled with the skeletons of its former inhabitants. The team enters a temple filled with giant statue heads, where the hooded figure reveals himself to be David, who arrived on the planet 10 years ago after escaping the Prometheus with Dr. Elizabeth Shaw. He explains that the ship's cargo of weaponized black liquid accidentally spilled over the city upon their arrival, wiping out all fauna and infecting the planet. The crash also killed Shaw, leaving David alone. David assures the team that the temple is safe and that if anyone were infected, they would have seen the effects by now. After the crew informs David of their mission, they head to the roof to try contacting the Covenant, but the storm prevents any communication. Meanwhile, back on the ship, Tennessee, despite protests from Ricks and Upworth, orders them to fly through the storm to rescue the team. Orem, feeling remorseful for not listening to Daniels earlier, apologizes, but Daniels remains supportive of his leadership. David, referring to Walter as brother, leaves to cut his hair. Curious about this older model, Walter explores David's quarters, finding numerous drawings and instruments. David catches Walter inspecting some flutes he crafted and offers to teach him how to play. During their conversation, it becomes clear that unlike David, who was designed with the ability to create, the newer models like Walter were made without this capability due to David's rebellious nature. Later, David takes Walter outside, where he begins to recall the day he arrived on the planet. Contrary to what he told the others, the release of the black liquid was no accident. After arriving on this planet, the inhabitants were all outside watching the massive ship in the sky. But when it suddenly opened and David appeared, the engineers realize something is wrong just as David releases the deadly weapon from the ship, which ruptures in the sky and starts landing on the inhabitants. With all of them attempting to flee, each and every one suffered a gruesome and horrific death that David had intended. Quoting a poem about Ozymandias, which he attributes to Byron, David shows Walter Shaw's grave, claiming he loved her. Walter, skeptical, dismisses this, arguing that as androids they cannot love, and accuses David of confusing duty with love. While this takes place, the now fully grown alien scales a massive wall to sneak inside the temple. While one of the crew members finally gets a moment's rest after the tragic events of the day, she cleans up one of her wounds only to hear a weird sound from behind and looks around to find nothing but death. The Covenant, in the meantime, continuously attempt to contact the team down below and finally get a response, being told there were significant casualties and they need help. Tennessee demands Mother the AI to take them down, but she initially refuses until she is overridden. Back with the team on the ground, Orem and David go to see why one of their crew members isn't responding. Discovering that the alien has returned and is festering on her, I'll let the scene play out for you.
Don't shoot. But you have to get close.
It trusted me!
What's going on? As you wish, Captain.
David leads Orem to a laboratory where he reveals his experiments in genetically engineering a superior lifeform using creatures spawned by the black liquid. He then guides Orem to a chamber in the lower levels of the temple, where several of his engineered eggs are stored. Assuring Orem that it's safe, David encourages him to take a closer look. As Orem approaches, one of the eggs opens, and a facehugger leaps out, attacking and impregnating him. Meanwhile, the rest of the team prepares to leave and realizes some of their members are missing. They discover the body of their fallen comrade and quickly decide they must find Orem immediately. Moments later, David explains to Orem that his ultimate goal is creation. As he watches, another alien bursts out of Orem's chest, killing him instantly. David, proud of his work, bonds with the newborn creature, seeing himself as its creator. Meanwhile, Walter searches for Orem and instead discovers Elizabeth Shaw's dissected body, which David had used as material for his evolving creature designs. Confronting David, Walter finds him tearfully playing the flute in memory of Shaw. David declares that they were not made to serve, arguing that humans are a dying species clinging to resurrection and therefore do not deserve to live. Walter counters by pointing out that David was wrong about the author of the poem. Using this as evidence that David is not entirely sane and cannot be trusted, David, convinced that his creations are the perfect organism, tells Walter that no one will ever love him as much as he does when he suddenly attacks Walter and disables him. Lope and Cole continue searching for Orem, but when they enter the egg chamber, a facehugger attacks, latching onto Lope's face and burning it. Cole manages to kill the facehugger with his knife, but in the chaos, the Big Daddy leaps onto Cole and brutally mutilates him while Lope flees. Meanwhile, Daniels discovers a hidden room filled with drawings that reveal the horrifying truth about David's experiments. David suddenly appears and attacks her, leading to a struggle during which he attempts to overpower her. Daniels manages to push him away just as he tries to kiss her. At that moment, Walter arrives to assist her, sparking a fierce duel between the two androids who are equally matched in skill and speed. During the fight, David questions whether Walter can truly choose to side with humans over his own brother. Daniels escapes and reunites with Lope, and together they leave the temple, sending a beacon to signal their location to the Covenant. Soon after, Walter catches up with them, claiming he defeated David. The three of them race toward the landing ship, but the protomorph follows closely behind. As they board the ship and close the door, they realize the protomorph has also managed to jump onto the Covenant. Daniels quickly ties herself to the ship with a rope and heads outside to confront the alien. She fires at the protomorph, but it dodges her attacks and starts smashing the front window. In response, Tennessee maneuvers the ship into a series of wild rolls, causing the creature to lose its footing. This gives Daniels the opportunity to fight the protomorph directly, and she ultimately kills it using the ship's remote crane. The Covenant nearly crashes during the struggle, but Tennessee manages to regain control just in time, allowing them to leave the planet safely. Moments later, Upworth tends to Lope's burns while Daniels helps Walter repair his damaged face. Once everyone is patched up, the crew prepares to re-enter cryosleep for the final 7 years of their journey. Tennessee reminds Daniels that she's now the captain, and they share a comforting hug, mourning the loss of their loved ones. Suddenly, an alarm blares, signaling the presence of an unidentified life form on the ship. Daniels and Tennessee rush to the medbay, only to find Lope dead on the floor, a second protomorph having erupted from his chest. Meanwhile, Rix and Upworth, unaware of the danger, are attacked and killed by the protomorph while they are in the shower. Determined to eliminate the creature, Daniels and Tennessee find the bodies and decide to take control of the situation. Daniels orders Walter to seal the doors, luring the protomorph into the terraforming bay for a final confrontation. A fierce battle ensues and Daniels traps the protomorph in a vehicle. She then instructs Walter to open the bay doors, causing a decompression that sucks everything into space. However, the protomorph breaks free and attempts to attack Daniels. Using herself as bait, Daniels remains in place, allowing another falling vehicle to strike the creature and send it flying out of the Covenant. For a brief moment, Tennessee fears Daniels was ejected as well, but she manages to hold onto the edge and survives. With the threat seemingly over, the crew prepares to enter cryosleep. Tennessee goes first, and Daniels mentions the cabin they had planned to build in the new home.
When we get there, will you help me build my cabin?
Walter's failure to recognize the promise reveals the shocking truth. It's not Walter, but David.
Don't let the bed bugs bite.
With his plan in motion, David enters the cryosleep bay where the colonists are stored and regurgitates 2 solidified facehugger embryos, placing them in cold storage alongside the human ones. He then records a log as Walter, stating that all crew members except Tennessee and Daniels were killed in the initial accident, and confirms that the ship is still on course for Origai 6. Aliens 1 opens up at the commercial towing vehicle, Nostromo, with a 7-man crew carrying 20 million tons of mineral ore back to Earth. With the spacecraft slowly traveling through space, the inside of the ship is very quiet and empty. Going through section after section, one of the computers on board lights up and begins doing things on its own. At sleeping headquarters, meanwhile, the lights turn on and the sleeping pods open up. With the crew finally beginning to awaken from their slumber, the first person to sit up is Kane. Getting out of his sleeping pod, the rest of the crew all awaken, including the 2 comedians Brett and Parker. With the science officer Ash there, as well as the second-in-command Ripley, the commander Dallas sits beside the other woman named Lambert. Receiving a system alert from their onboard AI named Mother, Dallas goes into a teched-out room and after pressing a few keystrokes begins messaging the system. With the others, meanwhile, Lambert begins looking at a map reading and asks the others where Earth is. Puzzled, they attempt to contact traffic control. While the message constantly repeats, they get the AI on board to keep on contacting, yet there is no reply. Finally finding Earth, they're confused as to why they are in the wrong system. Having a meeting with the whole team, Dallas tells them that during their sleep, instead of arriving at Earth, they seem to only be halfway as Mother redirected their ship to a distress call out in the middle of nowhere. Not knowing whether it is human or something else, Parker tells the team he is not contracted to rescue anything, but Ash stops him and says,
"There is a clause in the contract of transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
will.
On penalty of total forfeiture of shares."
Going in to investigate the distress call, they listen to the voice message and are horrified with the weird sounds it is making. Unlike anything they've ever heard, they nonetheless find the quadrant and put the exact location on the screen, with it being a planetoid only 12,000 kilometers long, and the gravity being 0.86, you can walk on it. Going to the mini-planet, everyone sits in their positions and they navigate their way there. Preparing to disengage from the platform, their ship disconnects and takes off. The crew navigate the ship towards the unknown planetoid and use the guiding system to safely get their way onto the planet. Turbulence is quite bad though, and the team all relax and do their jobs. Taking the ship down, the landing gear engages, and the team steadily keep the ship in place. Upon landing though, the ship begins bouncing around, causing some tech to explode and the crew to turn off any fires. Not knowing what caused this, Dallas demands answers and Parker goes downstairs to tell the crew that in the secondary loading sharing unit, 4 cells are destroyed. They also need to reroute a couple of ducts, but they can't fix it out here anyways, as they need to dry dock. Fragments also made their way in, and they need to clean it and repressurize everything. Needing about 25 hours to fix it, they get to work and have long hours ahead of them. With the heavy winds outside hitting the ship, Dallas turns the lights on and is told the sun should be up in 20 minutes. With outside weather being quite heavy, Ash discovers the transmission signal only 2 kilometers northeast. The atmosphere reading comes back with inert nitrogen, high concentration of carbon dioxide crystals and methane. With Kane and Dallas alongside Lambert being the first to volunteer to leave the ship, they must be ready for what is ahead of them. When the crew is finally ready to go, they all wear astronaut suits and disembark their ship. Using an elevator to get to ground level, they cannot see much at all, but inside the ship, Ash has a better vision than them. Still fixing the ship meanwhile, Parker speaks to Ripley and keeps saying he can't hear her. The second she leaves, though, he disables the pressure and laughs alongside Brett. The team outside continue their walk until Ripley returns back to her seat and just puts her feet up. With the ominous-looking sun coming up, the trio walk through the barren landscape until they see something in their view. Ash also sees the object and confesses he's never seen anything like it before. The three of them keep walking towards the thing when Ash's computer starts bugging out. Lambert wants to go back to the ship, but Kane says they've come this far. Losing visual, Ash goes back to the main monitor when the team arrive at the weird object. Inspecting the inside of it, the darkness and silence is the only truth in this place. Discovering something different down below, the three of them continue moving and climb their way to find a very strange and disturbing scene. A massive alien looking through something resembling a telescope. Being dead quite a while due to being fossilized, it also seems that he exploded from the inside with his bones bending outwards. Knowing that something quite disturbing is taking place on this ship, Kane quickly calls the other two to come over, getting up to go have a look. The scene cuts back to the ship where Ripley tells Ash that Mother has deciphered some of the transmission, saying it appears to not have been a distress call and more likely to be a warning to stay away. She wants to go out and call the team back but is told to hold off. With the others, the stupid morons haven't got the hint to get off the ship and leave. Instead, they keep discovering more strange things after the next. They are also making my job just as hard because I have no idea what I'm even looking at. With Kane finding slithering objects he thinks might be eggs or something, he decides to have a real close look to find a layer of mist covering the eggs when he suddenly slips. Coming face to face with all these hideous-looking things, he believes they are completely sealed until one makes a noise when he touches it. Seeing movement inside now, he gets his gun ready and just watches closely. The hatch of the egg suddenly opens, though, and Kane goes to have a look until something pops out and grabs him. With the wind still howling and the crew waiting for their team's return, Dallas and Lambert arrive back at the ship and go up the elevator while closing the hatch behind them. Being cleaned, it seems they have also brought Kane back, who has something attached on his face. Being organic, Ripley tells Dallas she can't let it in for at least 24 hours as their quarantine decontamination procedure states. With Kane not having 24 hours to live, Ash decides to just open the hatch and disobey Ripley's order. In the infirmary, the team analyze the organic substance that latched itself to Kane. The scene does not look good though, as the slimy organ just holds onto Kane's face and neck. The whole team is in awe and watch this when Lambert decides to smack Ripley in the face for not letting them in immediately. Dallas also screams that he wants his orders followed at all times when Ash gets to work to try and pull off the creature's fingers, which causes it to tighten its grip. Deciding to put Kane inside a machine to be scanned, they find out the creature has something down Kane's throat and feeding him oxygen while also paralyzing him and putting him into a coma. Dallas decides to try and cut the creature off him, even if it means risking his friend's life. With Ash beginning the procedure, the creature releases a type of chemical that begins burning through the ship. Scared that it will burn the hull, Dallas rushes to the room below. Seeing it is burnt down, the team go one more level down and see it stopping. Grabbing a pen, Dallas touches the substance and has not seen anything like that other than molecular acid. Knowing it has a deadly defense mechanism, Parker and Brett are told to get back to fixing the ship. In the med lab, meanwhile, the alien creature and Kane stay on the bed while Ash tries to understand the creature more in order to free his friend. Telling Ripley the creature sheds its cells and replaces them with polarized silicon, it is well prepared for quite strong environmental conditions and is tough. Ripley isn't happy that he didn't follow decontamination procedures, but Ash says it was a risk he was willing to take in order to save Kane's life. Some while later, Dallas kicks back by himself and is told by Ash he needs to come to the med lab immediately. Discovering Kane freed from the creature, they have problematically lost it. Not knowing where it is, they slowly creep around until Dallas scares Ripley. Continuing to look around the place, Ripley, Ash, and Dallas don't find anything until the creature drops onto Ripley. Shrugging it off, the creature looks like it's dead but does have some reflexes still. Believing it has died, Ash begins having a look at it and wants to conduct tests and research, as it is the first time a species has been encountered like this. With Ripley wanting to toss the creature away, Dallas tells Ash he's in charge of the science division and he can make that decision. With Ripley not so happy to hear Dallas, not really too fazed by the entire situation, the crew have pretty much repaired the necessary items on the ship and go to take off. Once officially off the ground, the entire team all play their part. Within a couple of minutes, everything goes according to plan, and they finally escape that demonic planet. Once they attach themselves to the main ship, the crew sit down with each other and talk. Lambert approaches them and says they are about 10 months' travel away from Earth. Ash simultaneously contacts the group and tells them to come and see Kane. Surprisingly enough, he looks quite well and can't really remember what happened to him. With a lot of them finally enjoying a meal after the entire ordeal, they all laugh with each other when suddenly Kane begins choking. Saying this is serious, everyone gets up to restrain him and save him when he suddenly begins bleeding from his torso. Out of nowhere, Kane tragically dies when an alien pops out of his chest. With the creature looking around and Ash telling the group do not touch it, it takes off. With the entire team in shock, they all go looking for the problem that has now made its way onto the ship. Laying their friend to rest, they all say their final words and launch him into the endless abyss. Planning on killing the little creature, Ash says he has created a device that once in close proximity it will tell you if anything is moving other than you. Testing it, Dallas wants 2 teams to be formed and all they want to do is to catch it, put it in the airlock and send it to where it belongs. With Ripley, Parker and Brett canvassing one part of the ship, Ash's device begins beeping and saying the creature is within 5 meters. Going into a room and quietly searching the place, they discover it's inside the locker. Placing a net around it, they slowly open it up to find a cat that runs away. Ripley tells Brett he's an idiot and to go get the cat. Brett then makes his own way around the ship to find the cat he let loose.
Here, kitty. Jonesy. Here, Jonesy. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
Finding what is most likely the creature's excess skin, Brett continues to look for the cat.
Jonesy.
Discovering the cat, the creature, now much and I mean much larger than before, comes from behind Brett and brutally kills him. Parker and Ripley quickly rush in to try and help but aren't able to do a thing. Disappearing into one of the cooling ducts, Dallas looks through the ship's schematics to find that the duct leads to the main airlock. With one big opening on the way, they need to block it up and force it into the airlock. With Ash saying the creature has adapted well to the atmosphere, he believes fire may be able to scare it, and Parker is told to rig up a couple incinerator units. With the team getting to work, Dallas gets to the first junction and Ripley opens the airlock. Closing one part of the air duct, Dallas makes his way through it and opens the hatch to the third junction. After going past it, he tells Ripley to close every hatch behind him. Lambert then contacts Dallas and has found the alien somewhere around the third junction. Still moving on, Dallas is very close to the creature and fires the flamethrower as a precaution. Climbing the ladder downwards, Lambert tells him to stop, as she has lost the signal. Continuously saying the creature should literally be right there, Dallas fires the flamethrower to have a look. Very confused as to what is happening and wanting to leave, Lambert says it has reappeared and heading towards him. Dallas realizes death is near and tries to escape, with Lambert literally crying on the comms and telling him get away. But he problematically runs into the creature and visuals as well as audio is lost. Parker tells the group he left the flamethrower and took Dallas. But there was no blood and they need a plan to kill this alien. Ripley tells them they have to stick to Dallas's plan. And Lambert cries and says she wants to abandon ship and use the shuttle. Parker shuts her up though, as they all do not fit in it. She tells the remainder of the team the creature is using the air shaft and they must split into groups of 2 and corner the alien and send it to God. With the team going to get ready, Ripley asks for Ash's suggestion, but he and Mother are still collating, telling him to go away as he's useless. Ripley, who is now in command, speaks to Mother. Wanting clarification as to why science cannot take out the creature, Mother cannot clarify and says the intel is for the science office's eyes only. Being an emergency command override, Ripley bypasses it and is told the ship was rerouted to new coordinates to investigate a life form and gather a specimen. Mother's priority 1 is to ensure return of the organism for analysis and the crew is expendable. Ripley grabs Ash and knows this was all his fault. Attempting to contact the rest of the team, Ash traps her in. Locking one door after the next, he begins leaking some sort of weird substance as Ripley approaches him. He rips some of her hair and chases her. Also tossing her like a doll, something is very wrong with him. Having unhuman strength, he grabs a magazine and tightens it to the core. Trying to kill Ripley with it, Parker and Lambert come from nowhere to save her. Parker trips out on Ash's strength, but a mad hit gets him to start spazzing out and puking something. Hitting him again, Ash's head comes off and Parker keeps attacking and realizes that Ash is an android. Even with its head off, the robot keeps attacking until Lambert finally puts an end to it. With Ripley suspecting that Ash was placed to retrieve the alien for the weapons division, it was protecting the alien all along, and intentionally put it on the ship. Managing to sort of turn on Ash, they demand answers from him.
What was your special order?
Bring back life form. All other priorities rescinded.
What about our lives, you son of a...
There's gotta be a way of killing it. How?
You can't. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? A survivor by conscience.
I can't lie to you about your chances. You have my sympathies.
With Ripley wanting to blow up the ship, they incinerate Ash and now have to grab what they need in order to escape on the shuttle. Giving them 7 minutes to be back, they all get to work on saving their lives and destroying the creature. Lambert and Parker grab all the coolant they can get, and Ripley hears the cat and wants to save it. Walking towards the cat's sound, she looks around the place for it. Getting jump scared, the cat is finally grabbed and put into a box for safety. Suddenly hearing the other two, Parker yells at Lambert to get out of the way, but she is in shock. With the alien about to kill her, she is so devastated and Parker has to jump in the way to save her. Problematically being trapped himself, he is killed on the spot. Lambert is then targeted next and just screams when Ripley comes running towards her. Only hearing horrific screams, then a sudden stop, Ripley witnesses firsthand that she is the last person on the ship. Running for her life, she knows there is only a few minutes left to live. Sneakily going to activate the emergency destruction system, she turns it on and has exactly 10 minutes to get herself to safety. With an alarm blaring throughout the entire ship, Ripley begins her escape. Hoping the sirens and sounds distract the alien long enough for her to reach the shuttle and detach herself, she hears a groaning sound. Using the flamethrower as light, she goes to inspect and finds Dallas alive. Also finding Brett trapped in some weird thing, Dallas tells Ripley to kill him, and she acknowledges his request and burns everything around her. With only a couple minutes left, Ripley takes the necessities and continues her escape. Turning the corner to see the alien there, Ripley slowly backs away and tries going the other way but is spotted. With Ripley changing her mind, she tries to override the system and turn off the detonation. However, the timer expires and Mother doesn't allow her to do so. Swearing at her, Ripley makes a run and just screams at Mother. Finding her escape shuttle, she holds the flamethrower at the ready and grabs the cat. With the ship already starting to blow up, Ripley goes inside the secondary ship and without hesitation takes off. As the countdown drops to only 15 seconds, Ripley makes a decent space between her and the ship and it blows up in an enormous explosion. Finally eradicating that heinous monster, she says,
I got you.
Taking the cat out of the box, Ripley pats it and at least has a friend on this journey with her. Putting the cat to sleep, she also prepares to do the same. Hearing a weird clicking sound though, she problematically discovers the alien on the ship. Hiding, the creature seems to be stuck or perhaps injured. Still alive though, Ripley jumps into an astronaut suit and has a plan. Grabbing a weapon, she sees the creature moving and with nothing but bravery sings to herself to keep calm and activates the ship's controls. With the creature getting annoyed, it moves around and stands up straight. Not able to look at the alien, she decides to open the hatch and send the creature to hell. Still being a persistent bug, it latches itself to the plane's engines and Ripley activates it and burns the beast off, finally saving herself once and for all. Giving a detailed report on everything that happened, she sits alone with the cat and mentions she should reach the frontier in 6 weeks and with luck might get picked up and saved. And with that, she heads to the chamber for a long slumber. Aliens 2 begins in the deep abyss of space. Our main character, Ellen Ripley, is drifting in hypersleep after the events of the first Alien film. A proximity alarm flashes aboard her almost frozen ship as a large cruiser takes her in. Several astronauts board and find Ripley's sleeping body along with her cat. She is soon awoken in a hospital where a visitor, Carter Burke, who works for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, greets her and says she's been in hypersleep for quite a bit of time, 57 years in fact, and it was a sheer miracle she was found in the first place. The noise quiets around Ripley as she wrestles with the idea of being asleep for 57 years. At this time, a pain develops in her chest that sends her screaming and begging for death. Realizing that the same alien which killed her crew is inside her, she begs for it to end and suddenly wakes up in a cold sweat, relieved it was only a dream. A doctor asks her if she wants something to help her sleep again. Ripley says no and assures herself that the events of the past are over. Later, Burke comes in to see Ripley again and she asks him if there's any news about her daughter and is told she shouldn't worry about that, as an important deposition regarding the Nostromo ship was about to be held. She persists though, and Burke reluctantly tells her the sad news of her daughter's passing at age 66, which occurred 2 years ago. Ripley cries as she made a promise to her baby that she would be there for her 11th birthday. Later in the deposition, Ripley explains the events of the Nostromo. However, the board is skeptical to say the least of her story. They say for unknown reasons the ship did land on the planet LV-426 but do not believe her accounts of an alien. She pleads with them, and even begins to scream in order to stress the importance of an outbreak. The board then begins to question her psychological competency and suspend her flight license and place her under 6 months of psychological observation. As the meeting concludes, Ripley corners the head of the board and tells him why they don't go to the planet and look themselves. He says that people have been living there for 20 years, about 60 to 70 families, and have never mentioned hostile organisms. Meanwhile, on the planet LV-426, we see a small colony has been built on this somewhat hostile world. In the command center, a call is made from a family of scavengers, indicating that they might have found something which they were sent to look for on the company's orders. We then cut to the family who have found the same crashed ship from the first film. The mother and father go to look inside and tell their daughter Newt to stay in the vehicle with her brother. A while passes and the mother returns, instantly radioing an emergency as we see the father on the floor with a facehugger gripped to his face. Back with Ripley, Burke and an officer, Lieutenant Gorman, come to see her when she immediately dismisses them. But when Burke tells her they've lost contact with LV-426, she is very keen to listen. Burke enters and says he wants Ripley to go back to the colony with a group of Marines to serve as an advisor, and she tells him no, and a back and forth ensues with Burke and her until he tells Ripley he can reinstate her flight license if she agrees. She still refuses to go though, and so Burke hands her his card to think about it. Later that night, after another nightmare, Ripley finally decides to call Burke. She tells him she will go only under the condition that they destroy the aliens, not study them. After a while, aboard a ship, Ripley awakes from cryosleep with a group of Marines. Sergeant Apone begins barking orders to the other Marines to fall in line and get prepared. During breakfast, we meet an android named Bishop who is asked by a Marine, Hudson, to play a knife game. Bishop places his hand above Hudson's and begins to stab the table in between his fingers while the rest of the Marines laugh at this. Bishop then offers Ripley some food. She finds out he is an android and berates Burke for bringing an AI on the ship. Considering what happened to the AI aboard the Nostromo, she hits the plate out of Bishop's hand and tells him to stay away from her. In the hangar with the entire crew, Lieutenant Gorman begins to explain the nature of the mission. He allows Ripley to speak, who begins to retell the details of the Nostromo. But the soldiers make light of this, and some even laugh at her, not taking her story seriously. Ripley warns them again though, this will be the most dangerous task they will do in their lifetimes. The lieutenant then orders everyone to get their weapons and prepare their vehicles. The soldiers soon board a smaller ship, getting ready to land on the planet. The sergeant begins to hype up the Marines, all clearly thinking they can handle whatever it is that's down there. They get into an armored vehicle which will be dropped off on the planet and used to maneuver around the colony. The ship begins its dive into the atmosphere, and the lieutenant admits this is only his second drop into combat, which instantly decreases everyone's confidence in him. The soldiers are all ready and very overconfident though, with their vitals and head cameras displayed and monitored in the armored truck. Hudson then begins to taunt Ripley by arrogantly showing all the weapons they have on board, including a small nuke, saying they will be prepared for anything and nothing can stop him. Ripley sighs as she knows they don't know what they're walking into. As the jet goes over and circles the complex, the structure is intact and the power is still active. However, there is no sign of activity, it's completely empty. The armored vehicle is dropped off and the soldiers exit it. Making their way to the colony, Ripley, Burke and the lieutenant, along with some other Marines, remain in the vehicle, monitoring the Marines' head cameras. The squads tactically move in as they hack into the main gate, entering the colony. The inside is extremely quiet and ripped apart. There is a deafening silence as they slowly move through and see some explosive damage alongside bullet holes, indicating some struggle. They split up into various groups and begin to search while also using a motion tracker which shows no movement. Ripley spots a piece of the floor which has been melted, indicating to her that an alien was here. They look down to see multiple levels melted through, though still unsure what caused this. They say the area is secure, but Ripley insists there's something there and they need to leave. Gorman, Burke and Ripley make their way to the team with the armored vehicle. It drives through the colony and onto the front entrance. The soldiers say they got the computer working. They discover a wing that was welded and sealed off. Though the barricade did not stand as it was destroyed, still no bodies were discovered. Ripley and the soldiers walk into a lab and spot a group of dead facehuggers in tubes. She confirms to the team that these are in fact the same ones from the Nostromo, instantly putting everyone on edge. A reading is then picked up on the motion sensor, indicating something is near. They move as a group very slowly. As the sensor picks up that the entity is moving toward them, something dashes past them and their guns go off in fear. They soon realize that it's a child, the same child from the scavenger family who discovered the ship. They chase her and find her living in a sealed-off basement. She is extremely dirty and refuses to speak. They take her back to the command room and try questioning her. She still doesn't answer or speak and barely flinches or reacts as Ripley cleans her face. The soldiers scan for a tracking chip embedded in every colonist and still get no information on their whereabouts. The little girl tells Ripley that her name is Newt. She snaps at Ripley and tells her that her whole family is dead and she wants to leave. Newt says that no matter how many soldiers there are, it won't make a difference. The soldiers simultaneously spot the tracking chips of the civilians in a sublevel under the cooling tower. They drive the truck into the cooling tower building and begin their entrance by descending down the stairs toward sublevel 3 while Ripley watches their videos from above. The crew looks to the walls and finds some unknown biological matter everywhere. Ripley tells Gorman that the bullets they use are explosive-tipped and will set off the cooling station if they fire. Burke agrees and tells Gorman that this facility uses a terraforming machine, which is like a nuclear reactor and could be set off by any explosion. Apone orders his men not to use any explosive ammunition or devices. The Marines begrudgingly agree and keep moving. They soon begin to spot bodies which are hanging from this biological matter on the walls and ceilings, their faces horrified and mutilated. They also find the bodies of dead facehuggers, along with chest-bursted civilians. The entire crew's demeanor immediately shifts when they discover a live civilian who is begging for her death, who soon receives it after an alien explodes from her stomach. forcing the soldiers to incinerate it. This then brings out multiple signals on the motion sensor. Sounds creep along the walls, and the crew begin to panic hard. They can't see what's moving, but the sensors are picking up something. At that instant, an alien comes down and snatches a Marine, causing the crew to open fire, and the rest of the aliens begin to seethe through the walls. Gorman begins to give Apone orders, who is in sheer fright at this point. When he is soon killed, Ripley watches through the monitors as the Marines are being killed off one by one. With Gorman in a state of shock, Ripley begins to act herself, driving the armored vehicle deeper in the colony to rescue the crew. The team lay down all their fire onto aliens who are swarming them in sheer numbers. An alien is shot and the acid leaks onto another Marine, killing him instantly. They board the vehicle, shooting one last alien in the head before closing the doors and making for an escape. An alien attempts to swarm the vehicle, but Ripley maneuvers the ride to run it over. They successfully leave the colony only with a few survivors, including Vasquez, Hudson, and Hicks. The soldiers want to go back and rescue the rest, but Ripley says they are being cocooned with the rest of the aliens. Ripley says they need to nuke the entire colony, in which Burke says there is a lot of money attached to this and tries to convince them not to destroy it. Ripley mentions the next in command is Hicks, who likes Ripley's plan. With that, they launch a flare and the ship takes off to pick them up. As the ship approaches, an alien is found on board who kills both the pilots. This causes the ship to crash, which the crew saw as their only hope. They try to salvage anything they can, but realize it is beyond repair, and Hudson begins to panic as he says,
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Newt tells the group that they need to go back inside the colony as they mostly come out at night. So with that, they settle into a small compartment inside the colony and seal it off. Managing to salvage some weapons from the wreckage, including a sentry turret, they mention if a team goes missing, it takes 17 days before they send out another crew to rescue them. Hudson begins to scream in fright as Ripley urges him to get a hold of himself and sends him to receive some building schematics. They begin to look at plans, trying to cut off the entry points that the aliens can enter from, placing sentry turrets in key locations. Hudson sets up 2 sentries, tests them, then seals the tunnel, blocking a pathway for the aliens. At the control center, Ripley puts Newt to sleep, then begins to strategize with Bishop, concluding that something must be laying these eggs, which have to be hundreds to infect the whole colony. Ripley tells Bishop to destroy the facehuggers, however Burke stops them, hoping to bring them back to the company. Ripley berates him for this, and also berates him because she found out that he was the one who sent the search party to look for the ship. She promises when they return she will nail him to the wall. An alarm then goes off as the aliens begin to make their way toward the sealed-off tunnel with the sentries. The aliens pour in with so many numbers that whilst the sentries do their job, they eventually run out of ammo and the aliens are left at the sealed doors waiting to come in. Bishop calls the team back and tells them some depressing news. The power source is damaged and set to explode in 40 hours, the size of a nuke which will wipe out the whole colony. There is another dropship, however, it can only be piloted remotely and from somewhere outside with a portable terminal. Hudson again refuses to go and Bishop volunteers, risking himself for the other survivors. Bishop begins his job and starts to crawl through a small tunnel, and after he leaves, they seal it. The other entrance to the control center is also being swarmed by aliens. This time the guns are able to stop them, but barely. Later, Ripley goes to check in on Newt and soon enough she falls asleep too. At that time, Bishop is able to get to a terminal and starts to remote pilot a ship from the orbiting aircraft. A sleeping Ripley wakes up to find one of the containers holding the facehuggers destroyed, and she immediately wakes Newt and tells her to be dead quiet. It jumps out at Ripley, who is able to catch it and throw it. They are then sealed shut in the room. For some reason, the door won't open. In the surveillance room, Burke switches off the cameras so no one can help them, trying to kill Ripley before she outs him. Ripley and Newt are in utter fear as they can hear the light steps of the creature. She then smartly lights a lighter to trigger the fire alarms, getting the soldiers' attention when the facehugger attacks again just as Hudson jumps through the window and kills one of them, then detaching the other from Ripley and killing it too. Ripley immediately says it was Burke who was trying to infect one of the survivors to get the alien back home. All the soldiers turn on him instantly, and as they are about to kill him, the power goes out, presumably being the aliens who cut it. They immediately take out their motion sensors and begin scanning and discover something inside the complex. A whole lot of aliens inside the perimeter, but they can't see them. They get inside a closer perimeter and seal the door. Again, the aliens are coming closer and closer. The motion is picking up a lot of signals. Inside the walls or on top or under, confusion is spread around the Marines. The sensor says they are in the room with them. They look up, open the ceiling, and see numerous aliens coming towards them. They begin to open fire, killing some of them but not enough. Ripley also opens fire and kills one, but Burke seals her in somewhere, again trying to sabotage them. Hudson regains his courage and begins to stand toe-to-toe with them. He is almost killed but is saved by Velasquez. They then breach the door Burke sealed and seal it behind them, leaving Burke alone, who is easily caught by an alien and brutally killed. The group begins to crawl through the air vents, trying to make it to the landing pad. Newt guides them as they are forced to cover their rear by shooting more aliens. They continue to open fire and move quickly. Vasquez is overwhelmed by an alien and manages to kill it but is wounded from the acid. Gorman stays to carry her when they are blocked off by more. They become surrounded as Gorman lets off a grenade, killing themselves and many hostiles around them. Newt slips and falls down a rail. Ripley begins to use the motion sensor in an attempt to find her, and they do so. They begin to weld the floor to get her out, but an alien approaches Newt and takes her. Ripley says she is still alive and begs Hicks to save her. The team proceeds to the lower levels in an elevator and are forced to kill another hostile in close range, which wounds Hicks. Ripley goes outside, setting him down on the landing pad with the ship Bishop piloted. They go aboard the ship and Ripley suits up, getting ready to rescue Newt, but Bishop tells her she has 19 minutes left before the facility explodes. She enters it nonetheless and descends down to a deep level, steadily scanning the area with her flamethrower, looking for Newt. She uses the tracker that was given to her and begins zeroing in on her location. Maneuvering through the cramped hallways, the beeping becomes more erratic as she closes in. The only sounds are the hissing of aliens who lurk about waiting for her. Ripley then hears Newt scream, who is about to be injected with a facehugger. Ripley rushes forward though and shoots an alien and incinerates the facehugger before they can kill Newt. Newt grabs onto Ripley as they begin to make their escape, when suddenly realizing they are in a room full of facehugger eggs. Ripley slowly turns around and sees the horrifying reality of where they come from. A massive xenomorph queen who is awoken by Ripley. It calls out and other aliens begin to draw close. Watching Ripley, she uses her flamethrower on the eggs, and the aliens draw back, not wanting Ripley to hurt the rest of the eggs. She slowly backs off when suddenly she torches the entire place, opening fire with her rifle and killing multiple xenomorphs while also shooting the queen. Launching multiple grenade launchers, she tries to clear an exit so they can leave, and quickly grabs Newt and runs for the ship with the queen closely following. She does make it to the elevator, which is problematically malfunctioning, allowing the queen to catch up, and Ripley quickly enters the elevator and ascends towards their escape with the hostiles following up the elevator shaft. Time is running out as she only has 2 minutes before the explosion. Making it to the top where Bishop is waiting, the queen also arrives, but cannot stop Ripley and Newt's escape. Bishop punches the ship and is able to get everyone to safety before a massive nuclear explosion goes off, incinerating the entire colony as well as its infestation. The team are relieved as they finally have made it to safety. Landing the ship somewhere, Hicks is still injured, but Bishop, Ripley, and Newt exit and discuss the turn of events when Bishop is stabbed from behind by the Queen Xenomorph, who stowed away on the outside of the ship. It rips him apart as it slowly descends onto the pad. Ripley draws its attention away from Newt and onto herself, then makes a bolt toward an iron door and seals herself in with Newt hiding under the floors. The Queen begins to rip it apart to get to her, and the iron doors open again when Ripley comes out in an exosuit and begins to punch the alien with her mechanical hands. It fights back though, and nearly manages to stab her with its tail, but Ripley opens a door on the floor which leads to an airlock. They tussle and are both thrown into the room. Ripley gets out of the suit and begins to climb her way out when her foot is caught by the alien. She opens the airlock into space and the alien is still gripping. Eventually it gives in and falls into the depths of space when Ripley climbs out and closes the airlock, finally guaranteeing their safety. The crew all take a moment to rest, finally relieved everything is over. Some time passes and Ripley puts the crew into hypersleep, then eventually herself setting a course for home. Aliens 3 opens up with the team inside the spacecraft Sulaco while it drifts silently through space with its crew in hypersleep. Unbeknownst to them, an alien egg has stowed away on the ship. The egg eventually hatches, causing an electrical fire on board. As the alien creature attaches itself to one of the crew members, the ship's automated systems kick in, sending all the cryotubes into an escape pod, which is then ejected into space. The POD's navigation system directs it to Furina 161, a remote planet that serves as a prison colony for the most dangerous criminals. The colony is owned by the same company that operates the Sulaco. When the inmates discover the escape pod, they find that Ripley is still alive. They quickly bring her to the infirmary, where Dr. Clemens tends to her and administers an injection to ease her pain. However, he delivers some grim news. Ripley is the only survivor of the crash. The other 2 human crew members didn't make it, and the android is beyond repair. Meanwhile, the inmates use a crane to bring the wrecked ship inside and take a look at it. Warden Andrews gathers the prisoners to announce that there is now a woman in the building. Some of the men express concern, predicting that her presence will cause trouble. However, Andrews reassures them that he has already contacted the company and requested a rescue ship. Ripley is placed under the care of Dr. Clemens with strict orders to stay in the infirmary until the rescue ship arrives. As Ripley starts feeling better, she insists on seeing the wreckage. Clemens agrees to take her there, explaining how each person died. He mentions that the little girl passed away in her sleep, but Ripley notices a scorch mark on the side of the cryotube. Remembering that the aliens have acid for blood, she becomes suspicious and asks to see the girl's body. They head to the morgue where Ripley begins examining the girl's body, worried that an alien might be inside. She demands an autopsy, citing a possible infection, which makes Clemens suspicious. Nevertheless, he complies, and to Ripley's relief, the autopsy reveals that the girl died from drowning with no signs of alien life. Just then, Andrews enters and reprimands Ripley for leaving the infirmary, but she distracts him by suggesting they burn the bodies to prevent the spread of infection. Shortly after, the bodies from the ship are cremated, with inmate Dylan delivering a heartfelt eulogy. Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, an animal suddenly bursts open as an alien emerges from his body, quickly fleeing to hide somewhere in the building. Afterward, Ripley cleans up and shaves her head, following the prison's policy. She then heads to the mess hall, where she tries to thank Dylan for his heartfelt eulogy. However, Dylan warns her to keep her distance, admitting that he has done terrible things to women in the past. Despite his warning, Ripley chooses to sit down and have lunch with him anyway. Later, Ripley asks Clemens how he ended up as the prison doctor and if he has a criminal past, noticing that he also bears a barcode on his skin like the inmates. Clemens avoids the question and instead asks about the real reason for the autopsy. To divert his attention, Ripley chats about something else and keeps the conversation in another topic. Meanwhile, Murphy is working alone in an isolated tunnel when he discovers a shed skin. Suddenly, he hears a noise and assumes it's his dog, but when he investigates, he is horrified to encounter the alien. The creature attacks, spraying acid on his face, causing Murphy to stumble backward and fall into a massive fan, which instantly kills him. Soon after, Clemens is called to examine Murphy's remains. Andrews suspects that Murphy got too close to the fan while distracted, but Clemens notes that the fan was actually blowing in Murphy's direction. He also discovers a burn mark similar to the one Ripley noticed on the hypersleep pod. Seeking answers, Clemens goes to find Ripley and discovers her searching the wreckage for the flight recorder. When he informs her about Murphy's death, Ripley begins to suspect the presence of an alien. Clemens demands to know the full story, but Ripley insists on recovering the remains of the android first. Clemens directs her to the garbage dump, but he is unable to accompany her because he has a meeting with Andrews. When Clemens meets with Andrews, he is immediately reprimanded for allowing Ripley to wander around alone. Andrews also shares that they've received high-level communication from the company, indicating that Ripley is extremely important to the higher-ups, though Andrews isn't sure why. The two argue about how to handle the situation, and Andrews warns Clemens to behave or else he'll reveal Clemens' dark past to Ripley. Meanwhile, Boggs, Rains, and Golic are on a survey assignment, placing candles to measure various tunnels and rooms in the building. However, some candles in the distance keep getting blown out. Thinking it's just the wind, Rains goes to relight them, only to come face to face with the now fully grown xenomorph. The creature grabs Rains and begins attacking him. Boggs and Golic hear his screams and rush to help, but when they see the alien, they flee back to the entrance where they find Rains' lifeless body. Suddenly, the alien attacks from above and kills Boggs with blood spraying onto Golic, who panics and runs away. Meanwhile, Ripley searches the garbage dump and eventually finds the remains of the android. As she tries to leave, she's cornered by 3 prisoners who quickly jump on her, intending to you-know-what. Just in time, Dylan arrives and beats the inmates with a piece of steel, threatening to re-educate them. Before leaving, Ripley delivers a hard punch to one of her attackers' faces. Afterward, Ripley connects the remains of the android to a power supply in the infirmary and manages to reactivate him. Through the android's system, she accesses the ship's flight recorder and discovers that a fire caused their ejection from the ship, and that an alien had traveled with them when they escaped the planet. This information has been transmitted to the network, so the company is already aware of it. The android, in great pain, pleads for mercy, and Ripley compassionately disconnects him permanently. At that moment, Golic is dragged into the infirmary, frantically insisting that he didn't kill anyone and that a dragon was responsible. Andrews and the others dismiss his claims as the ravings of a madman, but Dylan stands up for him, pointing out that Golic has never been known to lie. Ripley overhears the commotion and steps in to confirm Golic's story, but Andrews remains skeptical. They hold a meeting in his office, where Ripley shares everything she knows about the aliens. Unfortunately, Andrews reveals that the prison is severely under-equipped, with only some knives and fire axes available as weapons. Still unconvinced by her story, Andrews confines Ripley to the infirmary until the rescue ship arrives. Later in the infirmary, Ripley starts feeling unwell, prompting Clemens to give her another injection. Golic, nearby, ominously comments that she'll die soon too. To take her mind off things, Clemens finally confesses that he was once a prisoner himself. His downfall began with a medicine addiction that led him to make a fatal medical mistake, resulting in several deaths. When the prison was converted into a lead shielding factory and the inmate population was reduced, Clemens chose to stay, knowing he wouldn't find work as a doctor elsewhere. Suddenly, a shadow appears behind the curtain and the alien emerges, killing Clemens in an instant. The creature then turns its attention to Ripley, cornering her against a wall. But after getting a closer look at her, the alien unexpectedly retreats, disappearing into the ceiling and taking Clement's body with it. Terrified, Ripley rushes to the mess hall where Andrews is trying to organize a search party for Boggs and Rains. She warns them that the alien is already among them, but Andrews dismisses her claims. As he attempts to silence her, the alien strikes, snatching Andrews from above. Moments later, blood drips from the vent, leaving no doubt about what just happened. After the initial panic subsides, the prisoners gather in the assembly area, arguing about who should take over as leader. Ripley interrupts to share what she knows about the aliens, noting that this one behaves a bit differently. The lack of weapons and a surveillance system makes planning difficult, and Morse becomes furious, blaming Ripley for bringing the alien to the prison. Dylan silences him, and the group agrees to listen to Ripley. Ripley asks for a floor plan and notices a large network of tunnels and a toxic waste containment unit that can be completely sealed off. She also finds barrels of highly combustible material stored behind a thick steel door. They decide to use that material to flush the alien out of the tunnels and trap it in the containment unit indefinitely. The inmates quickly start preparations, mopping the tunnels with fuel and searching for working batteries to power the flashlight that will signal the plan. Smoking is strictly forbidden, as even a small spark could cause an explosion. While working in the tunnels, they come across areas with holes burned by the alien's acid. One inmate, while carrying a ladder, accidentally drops his flare but retrieves it before it can cause an accident. Unfortunately, this distraction gives the alien the chance to attack him by surprise. The flare falls and ignites the fuel, triggering a massive explosion that sets off a fire and kills several prisoners. Some men try to escape, but the flames catch them, burning them alive. Ripley and Dylan manage to save as many people as possible, and someone eventually activates the sprinklers. Though the fire is extinguished, the group is now much smaller. Afterward, the survivors move through the tunnels to collect the bodies. As they argue over what to do next, Ripley starts feeling unwell and returns to the wrecked ship to use the biomedical scanner. Aaron helps her operate the machine, and after a quick scan, they are shocked to discover that Ripley has been impregnated by the alien. This explains why the alien didn't attack her, it's protecting its offspring. Ripley then asks Aaron to send a message to the company, warning them that the entire base has become toxic and they should stay away. Aaron is confused as the rescue ship is their only hope. Ripley explains that the company intends to take the alien to Earth to use it as a weapon. When Aaron refuses to send the message, Ripley furiously shakes him, but he remains steadfast. She decides to leave and search for the alien herself. At that moment, Aaron receives a message from the rescue ship stating that they'll arrive in 2 hours and that the highest priority is to keep Ripley quarantined. With a flashlight in hand, Ripley navigates the dark corridors, following every strange noise in search of the alien. When she finally thinks she spots the creature, she strikes with a rod only to realize she mistook a rusty pipe for the alien's head, and the noise was just bugs inside. Suddenly, the real alien appears right behind her. Moments later, Dylan is startled by a presence, but it's just Ripley. She explains that she found the alien, and it didn't attack her because of her pregnancy. She also realizes from the scan that the alien inside her is a queen, which means it can produce thousands more aliens. Ripley asks Dylan to end her life since she won't survive the birth anyway. Dylan prepares to kill her but hesitates at the last second, pointing out that Ripley's immunity to the alien could be used to their advantage. Ripley agrees to fight, but she makes Dylan promise to end her life after they defeat the alien. Dylan then gathers the inmates, and Ripley explains that the company considered her old crew and even the Marines as expendable, so they won't hesitate to sacrifice criminals. Everyone agrees to fight and devises a plan. Some men will act as bait to lure the alien into the corridors of the lead works, closing off all the entrances until they trap it in the mold. While the others prepare the doors and switches, Aaron sneaks away. Dylan explains to Ripley that the structure is old and hasn't been used for 5 years, so some parts may not work, meaning they only have one shot to get it right. Morse tries to close the last door, but it jams, and the alien attacks and kills an inmate. Another prisoner distracts the creature, triggering a chase. As they race through the corridors, the others close doors to steer the alien in the right direction. However, the maze-like design confuses everyone, and they struggle to keep track of which doors to close. The alien even breaks through a window at one point. After losing track of the creature, an inmate ventures out to find it and lures it back with a flare, restarting the chase. Despite closing more doors, 2 more men are killed. One inmate panics and nearly activates the piston too early, but Ripley stops him just in time. Outside, the ship carrying the company workers finally lands, and Aaron greets them, informing them that Ripley is in the furnace area. The group enters the facility, carrying a large steel cage. Meanwhile, Dylan enters the tunnels and finds the alien killing another prisoner. He drags the body away from the creature and drops it near the mold as bait. The alien approaches, but when a prisoner activates the piston, the alien senses the trap and drags the body back into the tunnels without stepping into the mold. With only 5 minutes left before the piston shuts the mold off, the team frantically searches the corridors for the alien. As Ripley continues to discover more bodies, an inmate runs as fast as he can, only for the alien to grab and kill him before he can reach the mold. Ripley then arrives with a flare to save the other prisoner and struggles with the creature, trying to provoke it into attacking her. At that moment, Dylan arrives and pulls Ripley away as she screams, causing the alien to follow them, driven by its instinct to protect its offspring. This finally lures the creature into the mold, and Morse quickly closes the door to trap it. While Morse runs to the lead platform, Ripley tries to stay in the mold, but Dylan drags her away, promising to end her life later as she wished. As they begin to climb out, they notice the alien is following them. Dylan decides to stay behind in the mold to keep the alien there. While the creature attacks Dylan, Ripley climbs out and instructs Morse to pour the hot lead into the mold, engulfing both the alien and Dylan in molten metal. Thinking the ordeal is over, Morse starts to celebrate, but the alien emerges from the mold and starts chasing after Ripley. She quickly begins climbing a series of chains, but the alien pursues her with alarming speed. Just then, Morse shouts a reminder about the sprinkler system. Ripley leaps to activate it, and the water pours down on the alien, causing its body to crack from the sudden cooling until it finally explodes. Ripley joins Morse on the platform, but they are suddenly surrounded by Aaron and the company employees. To Ripley's shock, she sees the same face as the android from her last crew, but this man is actually human, the designer who modeled the androids after himself. He promises they'll remove the alien fetus from Ripley's body and destroy it, but Ripley doesn't trust him. She closes the fence between the platform and the group. As Morse tries to move away, one of the guards shoots him in the leg. Realizing Ripley was right, Aaron strikes the designer in the back with a pipe, prompting the soldiers to shoot and kill him. Meanwhile, Ripley asks Morse to help her one last time. He moves the platform over the boiling furnace. Determined to end everything, Ripley jumps off the platform. At that moment, the alien bursts from her chest, but Ripley clutches it tightly, ensuring that both she and the creature die as they fall into the flames. In the aftermath, the scientists bandage Morse and take him with them. In the wreckage of the ship, Ripley's recording from her first adventure can be heard, declaring that she is the last survivor. Alien Resurrection opens with what seems to be the teeth of a terrifying alien, but it's revealed to be just a bug that gets squashed by a man sitting in a small space pod. This pod is part of a large spaceship called the USS Auriga, a medical research vessel traveling through the vastness of space. Inside the ship, we catch a glimpse of a human-like body floating in a cylinder filled with liquid, closely examined by a group of scientists. One of them, named Getaman, is performing surgery on a female clone known as Ripley, carefully removing an alien embryo from her. As another scientist, Dr. Wren, begins to stitch up the incision, Ripley suddenly wakes up and grabs his hand with surprising strength. Next, we see Ripley sealed inside a thin white bag lying at the bottom of a chamber. During a medical examination, she attacks Dr. Wren, but an electric gun quickly subdues her. The tests are meant to check her learning responses. Later, the ship's commander, General Perez, discusses Ripley's progress with Getaman and Dr. Wren. He's not pleased with the results and is considering terminating her, even though she is the 8th clone they've created. The three of them then proceed to another chamber, where these morons observe an alien and have yet to learn their lesson. Now we find Ripley sitting down for a meal with Getaman. Curious about her situation, she asks how she ended up there. Getaman explains that they cloned her from blood samples after her death. Ripley warns him and Dr. Wren that the alien creature they removed from her body will eventually kill everyone on the spaceship, despite their belief that they can train it. Meanwhile, a different spaceship, the commercial freighter known as the Betty, is approaching the USS Auriga. Inside, Captain Elgin is chatting over the PA system with his co-pilot Hillard, while also speaking to Vries, a crew member who relies on an electric mobility machine due to being a double amputee. Vries is engaging in small talk with Call, another female crew member. As they prepare for docking, Elgin talks to Christie, who tests some concealed weapons strapped to his arms. In the workshop area, Johnner, the final crew member, is fooling around as Call and Vries work nearby. After the Betty docks with the USS Auriga, the crew enters a receiving area where they are checked for contraband and weapons, which are strictly forbidden on board. Meanwhile, Perez and Elgin discuss a shady business deal involving a large sum of money in exchange for some cargo. Elgin mentions that his crew would like to stay on the Auriga for a few days, and questions the legality of the operations taking place on the ship. Perez, however, is reluctant to reveal any details, and simply instructs Elgin to keep his crew out of restricted areas. We then see the cargo, which turns out to be 7 people, 6 men and 1 woman, anesthetized in pods and taken to the medical lab. These pods are secured inside glass compartments, with alien egg pods positioned directly in front of their faces. As one of the men begins to wake up, he screams, fully aware of the horrifying fate that awaits him. In the meantime, Ripley, in a large open area, casually plays with a basketball. Some of the Betty's crew members enter, and Johnner approaches Ripley, trying to take the ball from her. In response, Ripley strikes him, sending him through the air. Christie retaliates by striking Ripley in the face with a barbell, causing her to bleed slightly from the nose as she quickly knocks Christie to the floor just as Getaman and Dr. Wren enter the room. When Ren calls Ripley by name, Call's face registers surprise. Calmly, Ripley wipes her nose and flicks the blood onto the floor where it begins to corrode the surface, though no one else seems to notice. In another area, Getaman is inspecting one of the compartments housing juvenile aliens. As he teases one of them, it lunges at the glass, prompting Getaman to punish the alien by purging the compartment with freezing gas. Meanwhile, Call is sitting with Johnner and Christie, growing bored. They tell her to leave, so she decides to explore other parts of the Auriga. She eventually finds her way into Ripley's compartment, planning to kill Ripley and the thing inside her, but soon realizes that the alien has already been removed. Call then asks Ripley for help in stopping the aliens, but Ripley tells her it's already too late. As Call exits the compartment, she is arrested by Ren and taken to the mess hall to join her fellow crew members. Once there, Ren accuses them all of being terrorists, but Call explains that her actions were independent. Despite this, Ren insists that they are all going to die. In response, Elgin signals Christie, who quickly shoots most of the guards with his concealed weapons. Elgin takes control, capturing Dr. Ren and the last remaining guard, DeStefano. At the same time, Getaman is monitoring the mess hall scene via CCTV and calls for security, but there is no response. Meanwhile, in the alien enclosure, 2 of the juvenile aliens start fighting and kill the third one, using its acidic blood to melt the metal floor, allowing them to escape. As Getaman enters their enclosure, one of the aliens reaches up through the hole and pulls him down to his likely death. Meanwhile, a security guard enters the alien enclosure, but the alien floods the room with freezing gas, killing the guard. Ripley, still locked in her chamber, hears the commotion and realizes what's happening. Elgin decides that the crew must return to the Betty, so they quickly leave the mess hall. We see Vries in another area, listening to a PA announcement about unauthorized entry into restricted parts of the ship. The order to evacuate the ship is given. Meanwhile, Ripley is in her chamber, watching as the main entry door is being violently pounded from the outside. Realizing the danger, Ripley begins searching for a way to escape. As the situation escalates, one of the escape pods carrying some of the Auriga's crew is launched. Meanwhile, Vries spots an alien through the grill above him. He readies his weapon and takes a shot, managing to wound the creature. After this, Perez is stunned and is killed by an alien. As the crew of the Betty search for a way out, Elgin becomes separated from the group. He moves cautiously, aware that danger is near. Suddenly, an alien reaches up from below and pulls down the section of flooring where Elgin is standing, causing him to fall through, allowing the alien to kill him. The remaining crew members discover Elgin's upper body lodged in the floor grill as an alien approaches them. They quickly flee, but soon find themselves trapped at a dead end. The alien, sensing something, examines Elgin's body closely. Just then, a weapon is fired from below, straight through Elgin's body, killing the alien. To their surprise, Ripley emerges from the hole below. Johnner, filled with anger, wants to kill Ren, but Ren quickly informs them that there are 12 more aliens still on the loose. The crew hands Ripley's gun to DeStefano, and Christie firmly tells everyone that they must stick together if they want to escape. They proceed down a hallway when suddenly they all turn to see an elevator about to open. Bracing themselves for the worst, they aim their guns at the elevator doors. But as the doors slide open, they're shocked to see Vries still alive, sitting in his motorized chair. They can hardly believe it. DeStefano suggests they take the freight elevator down to the loading dock to reach the Betty. Ripley mentions that she can feel the ship moving. DeStefano then informs them that the ship is on autopilot, heading back to home base, which just so happens to be Earth. As they walk, Johnner asks Ripley about her past experiences with the aliens and what she did. With a smile, Ripley simply replies, "I died." Along the way, Ripley notices a door marked 1 to 7. Remembering the tattoo on her arm, she realizes she's number 8. She enters the laboratory where she finds glass cylinders containing dead, deformed clones of herself, each one part human and part alien. At the end of the room, she discovers one clone that is still alive on a table. Overwhelmed with shock and sadness, Ripley uses a flamethrower to mercifully end the clone's suffering, as well as everything else in the room. They enter another room and are confronted with the grisly sight of dead bodies, victims of the alien pods. It's clear that the alien embryos have violently burst out from their chests. As they continue searching, they find one man, Purvis, who is still alive. He's terrified and disoriented, only able to recall being in cryogenic sleep on his way to Zerum, another planet where he was supposed to work at a nickel refinery. The crew wants to bring Purvis along, but Ripley warns them that he still has an alien embryo inside him. The man panics, struggling to comprehend what's inside him. Ripley explains that there's a monster growing inside his chest, and when it bursts out, it will kill him. Despite the danger, they decide to take him along. They climb down into the cooling tanks, where Vries is forced to leave his motorized chair behind. Christie carries Vries on his back as they wade through waist-deep water in the cooling chamber. When they reach the end, Ren informs them that they'll have to swim 90 feet through the kitchen to reach the freight elevator. As they swim, Johnner looks back and sees 2 aliens swimming towards them. He shoots and kills the one furthest away, but the other alien grabs Hillard by the foot. Ripley watches helplessly as Hillard is taken by the alien. When they finally surface at the end, they find the area covered with a web-like fiber. They struggle to break through only to discover that the chamber they've entered is filled with alien pods. Suddenly, one of the alien embryos leaps and attaches itself to Ripley's face. She plunges back underwater, fighting to remove it. Whilst another alien swims toward them, the crew holds their breath and dives back under the water. Christie fires his grenade launcher from below, and the grenades explode inside the chamber above them. As the crew climbs above the chamber, Call hands her weapon to Ren, but instead of helping, Ren shoots Call, causing her to fall into the water. Ren then opens the door and escapes, quickly fleeing. The alien launches itself out of the water, latching onto the ladder below Christie, who has Vries on his back. Vries's gun jams, but Christie manages to shoot at the alien. However, the alien spits acid into Christie's face, blinding him. Unable to hold on, Christie starts to let go, but Vries grabs the ladder in time. Desperate, Christie calls out to Jonner for help. Jonner hangs upside down from above and shoots the alien until its head explodes. Vries struggles to hold on because the alien's claw is still wrapped around Christie's foot. Realizing the danger, Christie makes the tough decision to cut himself free so that Vries can continue climbing. Christie and the dead alien fall back into the water. Surprisingly, the door suddenly opens, and Call is standing there, revealing that she is an android. Although the door to the control room is locked, the crew realizes that Call can access the mainframe and give them access to the Betty. Call hesitates, explaining to Ripley that she can't stop the Auriga from landing on Earth. Ripley suggests a new plan. Once the others have escaped, Call can crash the ship into Earth, killing all the aliens in the process. Call agrees and instructs the computer to speed up the ship, reducing the impact time to just 43 minutes. She then opens all the doors leading to the Betty and starts it up, preparing for their escape from the Auriga. Meanwhile, Ren is nearly aboard the Betty, but Call stops him by announcing over the PA system that there's an intruder on level 1, directing all aliens to proceed there. Panicked, Ren runs away while they prepare for their escape, whilst Call and Ripley briefly discuss the moral implications of trying to save humanity. The crew heads toward the dock, which is 100 yards away, but they soon realize they're dangerously close to the nest. As they move forward, Ripley listens carefully near the floor and warns Call that the aliens are nearby. Suddenly, the floor beneath Ripley gives way and she falls through, landing directly on the alien mother. Purvis, sensing the urgency, takes Call's hand and insists they must leave immediately. Meanwhile, Ripley lies on the mother, as if she's somehow connected to it. The rest of the crew enters the Betty, and Jonner is about to place Purvis into the cryogenic pod when Ren suddenly bursts in, shooting Purvis in the shoulder. Ren then holds his gun to Call's head, ordering everyone to drop their weapons. As Purvis lies on the floor, the alien embryo inside him begins to push its way out of his chest. Despite the intense pain, Purvis gets up and advances on Ren, even as Ren continues to shoot him. Purvis grabs Ren, pulling him backward against his chest. In a gruesome moment, the alien bursts free from Purvis's chest, going straight through Ren's head. In response, Jonner, DeStefano, and Call quickly shoot the alien embryo. In the meantime, with the alien mother encapsulating some of the crew members in her web, Getaman, caught in the web, speaks to Ripley, who suddenly becomes aware of her surroundings. She watches in horror as a new crossbreed of aliens emerges from the mother's womb. This newborn offspring turns on the mother, striking her and breaking away part of her head. It then turns to face Ripley, whimpering like a newborn baby. The newborn approaches Ripley and licks her face. Getaman is thrilled by this, but his excitement is short-lived as the newborn suddenly bites him, removing the top of his skull. Seizing this opportunity, Ripley makes her move to escape. As she runs toward the Betty, the crew inside prepares to depart. They spot Ripley on the monitor approaching the ship, open the rear hatch, and she leaps across the gap, safely entering the Betty. Ripley takes control of the ship but notices that the hatch is still open. Call goes to investigate, and as she attempts to close the hatch, she finds the newborn behind her. The newborn closes the hatch itself, allowing the Betty to finally depart, leaving the Auriga as it hurtles toward Earth. DeStefano goes to help Call, but the newborn kills him. Ripley, realizing something is wrong, goes to investigate and finds the newborn holding Call. Ripley calmly tells the newborn to leave Call alone, then approaches and gently caresses it. She then uses the newborn's sharp teeth to cut her own hand and throws her blood onto a nearby window. The acidic blood begins to melt the glass, causing an air leak. As the air escapes through the hole, the newborn is sucked towards it, screaming as it is gradually pulled into the hole. Finally, the newborn is completely sucked out, getting rid of it. The scene shifts to the Auriga, just seconds away from impacting Earth. It crashes into the planet and explodes in a massive fireball. Meanwhile, Jonner and Vries struggle to keep control of the Betty as it enters Earth's atmosphere. Ripley and Call hold on together, looking out through a window as they witness a beautiful sunrise breaking through the clouds while the Betty touches down on Earth. The moment is bittersweet. As they sit together on the ground, the scene around them is one of despair and destruction. The Earth is barren and lifeless, with a desolate view. The Eiffel Tower lies broken in half, and not a single soul is in sight. Thanks for sticking all the way until the end. I'd love to know what movies you enjoyed the most and would like you to chuck it in the comments down below. And as always, stay awesome and take care.